to take in perceptions, however unrealistic or immature or faulty the perceptions may be, because even the nervous system of a little baby is not yet mature to understand things about reality. But there is an ego that is able to grasp some things. For instance, the baby is born, and the baby has a grasp or an awareness of the mother and of others that are not mother. The baby doesn't go after any object that moves, like the little ducks that go behind your shoes or anybody's shoes. The little baby is drawn to the mother, and to that aspect of the mother that is fundamental for his survival, that is the breast, and that aspect of the breast that is fundamental for the mouse, that is the nipple. And the baby knows. That belongs to the early ego. Now, you may say, it has an instinctual basis. Well, certainly it has. So has the early ego. Sure.
Yeah, the line is so fine between those.
It is.
You know, it's very difficult to think about it.
Right. Now, what?
Robert, just one quick question. Are the basic assumptions that Bion talks about at the group level the psychotic part of the group?
That's a very... I was actually waiting for that question. Yes. Yes, and Blandonu says it here. I think he says it in the next chapter, actually, in the chapter, the Introduction to the Epistemology, right? That the basic assumptions... Now, remember one thing. When Bion explained what the basic assumptions are, he said that these are dispositions in our individual minds that need a group to become manifest. But it's not that a group creates the basic assumptions, right? Just like it takes a relation between a patient and a therapist for the transference to become manifest in such a way that it can be observed. But this doesn't mean that the patient and the therapist create the transference. Only that the device that they have, right, the therapeutic frame in psychodynamic or psychoanalytic therapy, the frame, the behavior of the therapist, the rule of abstinence, no action, no intervention, just listening and observing, makes it possible for the transference to become manifest, to become observable. But it was there all the time before. If the patient doesn't have the ability to transfer, there is no transference, no matter who the therapist or the analyst is. If there isn't a group, the basic assumptions will not become manifest. They need a group to become manifest. But they are patterns or dispositions in the minds of the individuals.
Well, then my mind goes to the absence of the transference. Patients who manifest that absence of the classic transference, the ways that manifests, and then my mind goes to Meltzer, and Meltzer's working with those patients who are in the claustrum, and that manifestation of the transference, that's a whole other world.
Well, it is. O'Donnell is talking of Meltzer's patients that live in the claustrum, right? Where Meltzer says that those patients do not make transferences, that they live in another world. Well, because Meltzer is there reserving the word transference for neurotic patients, and he wants to speak of patients that live in the claustrum as patients that inhabit the non-human world. If you call transference the totality of the manifestations between patient and analyst, you would say, but they, I would still call that transference. I mean, that depends on how how much you extend or you narrow the definition of the word transference, you see. But the same thing happens with psychosis. We would say that a patient can dynamically be psychotic. A psychiatrist or the DSM-4 would in some cases not assess such a patient as psychotic. But when we say psychotic in psychoanalysis, we don't necessarily mean schizophrenic, right? A patient that splits, projects, and gets paranoid, we would say dynamically that is a psychotic mechanism. But no psychiatrist would say that that patient is psychotic, is schizophrenic. But the mechanism is psychotic in the sense that he's splitting something, projecting it out, much like someone who has hallucinations, and now feels that something is returning from the outside. Everybody hates me, for instance. Everybody hates me. When I came in, you said good morning to me in a different way. You had a different look in your eyes this morning. Well, I wasn't aware I had a different look, right? But the patient has this particular perception. We would say that is psychotic, but again, that depends on how much you extend or you narrow the term psychotics. In psychodynamic psychoanalysis, we do extend the word or the concept of psychosis much more than a psychiatrist would do. And then we include more phenomena. Why? Because the psychotic mechanisms are essentially different from the neurotic mechanisms. One, neurotics repress, or we would call neurotic that belongs to the world of repression, right? The primitive civilization. While we would call psychotic anything that has to do with a resurgence of a primitive catastrophe, when the patient attacks this object, attacks the link, smashes them, projects them out, and feels persecuted. We covered pretty much, I want to say, the two chapters at least. The one thing I wanted to add here is that this interesting look onto the Oedipal conflict, the intellectual Oedipal conflict that Bion makes the primordial push or moving of the mind towards growth or towards development, curiosity and the wish to know, in conflict with the desire to unknow. Right? Remember that I said when we just started that Bion took from Freud the dualism between love and hate, and life and death drive and eros. Right? Remember that I also mentioned there that Bion's, Klein's and Freud's conception of mankind is that we live in conflict, in a never resolved conflict. Right? The difference may be how we bear to live in conflict, or how we handle the conflicts we live in, the conflicts between love and hate. But we all love and we all hate. We are not all loving creatures. And if someone is all loving, you would ask yourself, where has the hate gone? It's probably been deflected, repressed, projected out. Somewhere it must have gone. I mean, we are not all loving. Even the little baby sometimes hates the mother and yells like crazy, right? So that we just have to learn that this is who we are according to Freud, Klein, Bion, right? Now, the search for the truth is what moved Oedipus to want to know the truth at no matter what costs. What killed him was the no matter what costs. That is, that the search for the truth was captured by his arrogant defiance that no matter what, he will find out, right? Therefore, it was captured by a death wish and didn't take into account that if you want to live, you don't have to be that arrogant. You have to respect the limits of what there is to know, because some truth may be killing. That doesn't mean that you want to belie yourself or others. It just means that you have to know what you're getting yourself into. And as therapists, we have to know that too. If we have an arrogant determination that we will cure the patient no matter what, we may end up having a very bitter experience. We may wish that we knew that much, that we could cure all our patients, but we better know, if we are in this business, that we are always there at our own risk. Some patients may be cured, others may commit suicide, and not necessarily because you're doing a bad job. It's just because you're not that omnipotent. You can't know that much that you can defy the death instinct of a patient ultimately. You can only go so and so far, right? Now, on the other side, another look at Oedipus, you could say that some of Oedipus's determination is what makes a good scientist or a good researcher, right? The determination that scientists have to devote their lives to just research comes from some aspect of Oedipus. All I want to do in my life is research, no matter what, right? I don't know if it's going to be useful or if it's going to be harmful. It doesn't matter, I just want to research. I take as an example Louis Pasteur. I don't know if you know the story, how Louis Pasteur dealt with the anti-rabies vaccine. He thought he had created a vaccine to fight rabies, or rather to prevent rabies, but he wasn't sure. But he was determined to find out whether that vaccine would work or not. What did he do? He injected those viruses to himself at putting his life at risk. He could have died. If what he wanted to find out, is it right, is it wrong? If it was wrong, he would have died, and that would have proved that he was wrong. But look, wasn't he a little bit like Oedipus, saying, I will find that out even if I die in the attempt? Right? So there is some courage, some arrogant courage in that determination, not always bad, one would want to say. And this little Oedipus was also a researcher, like Oedipus, who was determined to find out the truth at no matter what costs. Now, we would say we have to be cautious. If you know that you are there at your own risk and that you may find out something that you would rather like to ignore, then go ahead. If you think you're ready for it, go ahead.
But the whole analysis, though, at the same time, is about discovering some truth.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
So, not at any cost and no matter what. So, so there is a piece of that, about that desire to know the truth, that must have I guess, a neurotic or a healthy or an honest and genuine aspect to it. That it's not, I got confused because there is something about the drive to know the truth that we want our patients to have in terms of doing the work.
That's true.
Must have.
Yes, we must have. But as you say,